Hey everybody, welcome to Take Heart today. I hope you're doing well. I think this is episode 100 and, I don't know, 10 or something like that now. And I don't know about you, but I am feeling weary. We have been on quite a journey together over the last 100 or so days since lockdown really kicked in. And now we're in a position where lockdown is starting to ease off. And yet for lots of us, probably what we're feeling, and maybe not for everybody, but I imagine for most of us, we're feeling pretty wiped out. And that's for all the obvious reasons. Everything we've had to go through that has been such a dramatic change to our way of life and having to process that. The fact that in so many areas of life we will be under pressure. For different ones of us that'll look different. For some of us it's financial. For others of us, I imagine for all of us, it will be relational in some way. You know, marriages have been put through the mill. Parenting, whether you're the child or you're the parent, I'm sure that's been a challenge. And then on top of that, friendships where we haven't been able to see people, or we've been living with flatmates, and unable to escape, all of that stuff. And then on top of that, for lots of us, we'll be feeling the emotional strain of everything. And even as things begin to ease, there's all the good things about that, but also the reality is, probably for some of us at least, we got into a bit of a rhythm with lockdown, and now everything's changing again. Now, one or two of you may be very good at handling change. You might be an animal for change, but for probably most of us, any kind of change involves processing. And just even internally, without us realizing it, in our heads necessarily, processing how do we handle a whole new phase of what we're going through. And so because of all of that, there are not many people I've spoken to in the last couple of weeks who haven't felt pretty weary. And there's a verse that I want to look at from Romans chapter 12 verse 11, where Paul says, "Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord." The way the Message puts that same verse is, don't burn out. Keep yourselves fueled and aflame. If you're part of the church, you will know that a few years ago I had a burnout and I had a bit of a breakdown. I was 29 and long story short, I've been running really hard for a long time and just had neglected all sorts of important things. And so I hit this wall. And I found myself in a position where I loved Jesus and I wanted to make a difference in the world and serve people around me, but I just was incapacitated. I wasn't able to do that. It felt a bit like the equivalent of kind of trying to run when you've got a broken leg. No matter how much willpower I tried to put into it, I just had nothing basically in the tank. I had burned out. And since then, and since going through that, I've tried to learn as much as I can about making sure that I never go back there, as much as it's within my control. And I ended up there because I made some really bad decisions, basically. And one of the things that I've been working through is the fact that keeping my spiritual fervor, or as the NIV puts it, or keeping myself fueled, as the Message puts it, involves recognizing that we are human beings. And that's not a surprise to God, although sometimes that's a surprise to us. What that means is we have limits and we have needs. Eugene Peterson said, "We don't become more spiritual by becoming less human." For me, one of the things that has involved in the last few years is learning to try and keep emotionally healthy as I'm able to. And I mentioned when we did Take Heart, I don't know when it was now, but we talked about rest a little while ago and how sometimes it's helpful, just like with a phone will kind of flash up 10% battery remaining, and it's a pretty obvious signal. You need to recharge now, otherwise you're going to have a problem. We will have our own kind of versions of those battery signals, 10% battery remaining. For me, it's when I get really snappy, particularly with my boys, and I hate that, but I find myself doing it. It may be when I get too much in my head and I can overthink. For me, sometimes also I can find myself insecure in relationships, even with friends that I've known for years. And I'm aware that when some of those things start to happen, that's now me. I've come to recognize those as signals. Basically, that's 10% battery remaining. Andy is running, nearly on empty here, and some of what happens and some of what comes to the surface when that's going on, the Holy Spirit can speak into, and I want to maybe look at that in the next couple of Take Hearts that I'll do, just about how we can listen to the Spirit for what he might be saying through those things to us. But very much front and center, I think it ties in with being a human being and being somebody who, for all of us, we've been under an awful lot of strain for an awfully long time now. And although things will ease, even that is going to be a big challenge. So to that end, I just want to share, for what it's worth, a tool that I found really helpful. And again, if you're in the church, forgive me for repeating myself, but this has been a real blessing to me. And it's something I picked up from a number of different books and preachers in the last few years, this idea that we have a bucket. If you imagine us like a bucket, and we have things that replenish the bucket, fill it up, and things that drain the bucket. And I have stuck up in my kitchen, I drew this at the start of lockdown, this piece of paper. If you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, I'll just describe it to you. But basically, it's just a simple drawing of a bucket, and I've written out things that I know replenish me. And so those things are quality time with people I love, being outside, exercise, hard to get much of that done with my boys around, but I'm doing what I can. Having a good book on the go. I'm reading a really random book about wizards and weird creatures that they fight at the moment. Eating chocolate. Trying to eat my body weight at the moment in chocolate. Having a tick list, just having things I can tick off that I've achieved. And then stuff that drains me. Zoom is number one on that list. Feeling constantly torn between wanting to be around for the kids because I'm working from home a lot of the time, and also needing to do my work, and it's a constant internal battle there. When I'm doing one, I always feel like I should be doing the other. Failing to achieve things every single day. I set out with this long list of what I want to do, and I never manage it, and I find that draining. Admin, oh my word, don't get me started on my emails. And then feeling helpless, just feeling like, oh gosh, there's loads of people that I love who are struggling, and I feel like I'm helpless to help. I can't do anything, and that also drains me. So the reason I just say that is because I found it really useful just to stop and reflect and think about, all right, yes, this is a draining time, but why? What particularly for you is exhausting? What are those things? Identify them. Now, for some of those things, there's not a lot we can do about it. It's just how it is. But for some of them, it's possible to minimize. And even when there are things we can't do, just being aware of them is quite helpful. And then the flip side of that is, what are those things that will replenish me? I don't think any of us are going to get to a point during these days where our batteries are at 100%. But actually we have to choose to be really intentional about making sure that we are recharging where that's possible, and that we don't feel bad or guilty about it. It's not that we're going to stop serving Jesus so we can do some of these things. Our lives are given over to him, but he loves us and he wants us to thrive. And if our ambition is to serve him, then surely what it will be is to serve him over the long term. And if we're going to continue to do that, we're going to need to make sure we recharge. We said at the start of Take Heart, I think that this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. It is proving to be a marathon, not a sprint. And so my encouragement would be today, think carefully about what recharges you. And if you can, prioritize those things, knowing that God blesses us and he wants us to be replenished so that we thrive and so we can serve him well.